Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, welcome, thank you for joining. My name is Dr. Cat and this is Reading the Past. In today's video, what I'd like to talk about is the terms that I've been using, particularly the term early modern. Many of you may be more familiar with Renaissance to describe the period which I'm discussing. So I'd like to explain why I prefer to use early modern over and above the term Renaissance. We should begin by asking ourselves why we choose to or need to divide history up. Would it not be more suitable to look at history as one long continuum? And perhaps it would. It would certainly make it easier to see how one thing influences another. I also think that it would be quite difficult to teach or learn or even write about history in this way. I think a textbook that attempted to cover the entirety of human history would be at best reductive and in its worst instances very, very confusing and perhaps almost unreadable. So with that in mind, we should acknowledge that we divide history up not to serve the purpose of history, but to serve our own turn. It makes it easier for us to consume history in ways that we find meaningful. So that's the pros of dividing history up. Of course, the cons are that we have to choose sometimes arbitrary divisions for those histories. And what happens is that we line them up in neat little rows. So Tudor will give way to Stuart, or medieval will give way to early modern. And what that does to history and does to us as readers of history is that it allows us to think that history is a foregone conclusion. It denies us a clear view, potentially, of the turmoil and confusion that would have been experienced by our ancestors. Similarly, it allows us to believe that we are the first to suffer this notion of a shifting or flux of history, that as we look towards our own unsure futures, we can resign ourselves to thinking that it's never happened before. And I think that because of that, because we are potentially denied that experience of realising that history isn't a foregone conclusion, it can make us actually feel more anxious about our own passage through history. For example, the fact that we know that the restoration of the monarchy occurs after the Civil War, the beheading of a king and the interregnum, the fact that it feels like a foregone conclusion, it in some way divorces us from the feeling of instability that our ancestors would undoubtedly have felt living through that. I wonder if we were able to grasp that sense of instability, if we were able to see a similarity or feel a compassion for it, that we might be able to find some comfort in the fact that our own destabilising experience of the passage of history is not that novel, is not that unusual. There is, I think, comfort in that Battlestar Galactica saying that all this has happened before and all this will happen again. When we are made aware of these confusions where the world didn't end, our own passage through history can perhaps feel less cataclysmic. Another issue with dividing history up in these fairly arbitrary and sometimes overlapping ways is that it can feel like historical shifts happen overnight. When we are told that the Renaissance begins in the 14th century in Italy, it can be all too easy for us to think, well, Giovanni, living in Milan in the 14th century, wakes up one morning and goes, the Renaissance is here. Quick, wife, fetch me my telescope and astrolabe, because now we're doing humanism, so I must find empirical evidence for the way in which I see the world. Oh, and while you're at it, get the portrait paint around, because I want all of my pictures to have excellent perspective in the background. It needs to be hyper-real. And of course, that isn't what happens. Yes, we can see the blossoming of the Renaissance in the 14th century, perhaps earlier in Italy, and then it gradually spreading out across Europe, getting to England, they say, sometime in the 16th century. However, we are seeing the effects of Renaissance on the elites of society because that's who we have access to. So yes, as the Renaissance moves across Italy and into Europe, it affects the universities, the homes of princes and monarchs, but for the average person whose stories aren't written about by historians, whose portraits aren't painted by the finest artists of the day, we have little to no evidence that there was any change that occurred for them. Another example of this is in how we talk about the invention of the printing press by Gutenberg. We are told that in 1439, Johannes Gutenberg starts printing on the printing press and the world changes. Suddenly, literacy levels fly through the roof, books become more accessible. And absolutely, this does happen, but it's not an overnight thing. What it also does is it ignores the fact that the monastic houses that were creating the manuscript books that preceded printed books were operating sometimes in an almost industrial scale. There would be rooms full of monks writing out manuscript text. Yes, they were for an elite audience because paper was expensive and handwriting everything out, no matter how many people are involved, is an expensive process, an expensive product. They're illuminating and gilding these manuscripts. They're binding them in leather. But printed books also followed a similar form. They would leave a space where you could illuminate a first letter in the early printed books because they were attempting to mimic these manuscripts that had come before them. While I am not saying that the printing press wasn't a remarkable agent for change, because it absolutely was, what I think is necessary to point out is that it just wasn't this overnight sea change that occurred. It took a while for the technology of the printing press to have any real effect on the lives of everyday people. And this leads on to another factor, and the reason really why I prefer to use early modern over Renaissance. I think that in the term Renaissance, as it is meaning rebirth, there is an implied value judgment that all of these things that happen in the Renaissance are presented as making the world an empirically better place, that what came before it was therefore bad. There is a problem for me in that when I hear Renaissance, in my mind, it is a counterpoint to the Dark Ages or the Middle Ages. Those are the terms that I place together. And I think in calling the medieval period the Dark or Middle Ages, we do that period a disservice. We do the people of that period a disservice by saying that what happens before the Renaissance is dark or middle, that it's somehow transitional, that we're waiting for our real lives to begin. It makes us look at that period as being something negative, that we're waiting for the better things to come. For me, in the terms medieval and early modern, those value judgments aren't implied, and that is the real reason why I prefer to use early modern rather than Renaissance. Before we finish today, I'd like to ask you what you would call our period of history. What are we living through now? One suggestion has been that we're living in a digital or information or computer age. Now, if that's the case, when would you say that that had begun? For many people, they might say the 90s, they might even say the millennium. They might date it to a point where computers enter houses in a real, meaningful way, in a global way. But that isn't how history has been divided up in the past, as I've discussed. If we're going to talk about a computer or information age, we're probably going to have to date it to the 1940s, when the first computers were really being used. Now, granted, they were the size of a room and only accessible by the very elite of society, those in really high-flying universities or in military programs. Now, if we think about the 1940s, is that really what we would understand as a computer age? Similarly, in 1969, we sent man to land on the moon in a vehicle a computerized vehicle that had less processing ability than your average smartphone. The thing that we use to Snapchat and Instagram and tweet to take pictures of ourselves with puppy faces has more processing ability in the palm of our hand than the entirety of the space program was able to get together to put man on the moon. As with the technology of the Renaissance, the artistic elements, the things to look into space and understand our cosmos, the learning agendas, these were all placed in front of the elite before they made their way through society, before they were democratized. But the period begins when they first make their way into the world at all. There may very well be people who were born and turned 10 when we might wish to place the computer age as having started, who never, in the entirety of their lifetimes, managed to lay their own hands on a keyboard. 50 years feels like an awfully long time for us as we're living it, but it's the blink of an eye within the span of history. And that, I think, is quite a good example of why dividing history up can sometimes feel quite fraudulent and reductive, because for everybody who lived at the start of this information age, it certainly wouldn't have felt any different from what came before it. What do you think about the things I've been talking about today? Let me know what you'd like to name our period of history. What do you feel like you're living through? I hope you've enjoyed this video and found it interesting. Please give it a like, a share, subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon next to it so you know when I'm next uploading. You can come and find me on social media, on Instagram and Twitter. I'll be leaving the links in the description box down below. I look forward to seeing you all next time. Bye bye for now.